Hey everyone, Alex here from 20 Sides to Every Story. We've been running on the channel here an old school essentials campaign using the Dolmenwood campaign setting materials from Necrotic Gnome, shared on their Patreon, and it has been a blast. If you ever want to catch that content, you can watch the campaign live on our Twitch channel every other Saturday at 10 a.m. Central, or you can catch the replays here on YouTube. Or we've also been editing the audio down into a podcast format that you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts. I'll add a few links to where you can find the Dolmenwood podcast down into the video description. For those of you who are new to learning about Dolmenwood, it is a campaign setting designed by Gavin Norman, the designer of old school essentials, that brings together a folklore-inspired wood layered with fairies, witches, jolly friars, noble knights, and a deep, rich world to explore and hexcrawl through. I wanted to make a video here today to briefly discuss the ongoing development of Dolmenwood and catch up those of you unfamiliar with this project with some of the latest proposed changes and updates that have popped up more recently. Dolmenwood's development can be traced all the way back to a series of zines called Wormskin that were produced by Gavin Norman and Greg Gorgonmilk. Gorgonmilk? Is that his real name? These were produced in 2016. Wormskin promised to explore the mythic forest called Dolmenwood, a setting to be used with any basic expert rules set system or retroclone tabletop game, which would feature elements of an eldritch realm situated on the leafy edges of the land of Fairy. Over time, as this content was released, it eventually evolved into a Patreon, where the promise of 3 distinct books to support a Dolmenwood campaign were pledged: a player's guide, a campaign guide, and a monster book. While these materials were in development, Gavin shared their progress in real time as PDFs to supporters of the Patreon. It was a really unique experience to watch unfold as each content update to Dolmenwood would release new character classes, additional rules, background and setting information. The most exciting thing for me was each update gave us a slew of keyed hexes to explore that eventually added up to almost 200 6-mile hexes. Now, unfortunately, at this point, the Patreon is closed, and there was a lot of anticipation that there was a Kickstarter coming out sometime here this spring. But then, of course, as I'm sure you know, in the lands of Seattle, in the shadow of the OGL was cast upon all ongoing projects. A post on Necrotic Gnome's website on January 16th stated the commitment to find a new way forward to publish old school essentials by creating a version that would adopt an alternative license. The post further stated that plans for Dolmenwood would move forward as planned, as the content contained nearly no material that would rely on the OGL. Then, a month later, on the Necrotic Gnome Patreon, a post appeared February 15th with a big announcement. Dolmenwood would be published as its own standalone game rather than a supplement requiring a rule set such as Old School Essentials to play. This clearly meant that much more work would need to go into Dolmenwood before it could see the light of day. The pledge was put forth to add and expand the Dolmenwood Player's Book by about 80 pages to add in core game mechanics, all character classes beyond just the Dolmenwood flavored ones, and complete spell and equipment lists. The Dolmenwood Campaign Book would be expanded by 40 pages to include a referee guide and a chapter of Dolmenwood specific magic items. And thirdly, the Dolmenwood Monster Book would get an update of about 50 pages to include 60 additional monsters. As this is all brand new content, it would cause the plans for a Kickstarter to get pushed back by a few months, sending things back to a launch date of June or July 2023 at the earliest. Gavin Norman has a sterling reputation among the old school community and generally receives high praise for his adventures, design decisions, and the direction he has taken with everything he has produced with OSE. Surely, the response this time around would be the same.
You are tearing me apart!
Gavin. No. In the coming days of the announcement, a ton of negativity emerged from the community about this proposal. Not all of it was the usual grognard complaining for the sake of complaining, although there was certainly a lot of that. Among the criticisms that emerged, there were some substantial beefs with how this would affect the Dolmenwood experience. Some of the major issues that folks disliked were just a general feeling that the proposed changes were there to appeal to a 5e crowd. Some took issue with presenting race plus class as the default character creation system, rather than using the more old-school race as class system. Adopting an ascending AC system rather than using THACO. a general distaste for having to wait longer for the Kickstarter. I wanted to make this video just to talk about some of this, and in general make the argument that whatever comes forth from making Dolmenwood into its own game system, it's going to be more or less compatible with OSC or whatever old school game system people are playing anyway. Old school gaming is built upon a philosophy of kit bashing rules together to make something that is going to work for the referee and their players at any given table. Having more options and more ways to resolve common situations within the game is a good thing. And the rules that were included in the original Dolmenwood PDFs were all happy additions to the OSC rules rather than distractions or contradictions. Let's address first the idea that the proposed changes and additions are meant to make the game appeal to a 5e crowd. Gavin has stated that a core rationale for the changes he wishes to make is to see old school gaming become accessible to newcomers to this style of play. Which of course makes sense. He has a business to run, and at the end of the day, he has to make money. So in doing this, he needs to make some changes that retain the assumptions and practice of old school gaming design choices that will ease the unfamiliar into enjoying the game and setting. One of the hills that many seem willing to die on is that ascending armor class has no place in an old school game. THAC0 is essential to old school gaming, and people that don't understand it just can't math. The very concept of THAC0 is memeable, and defending it from this weird traditionalist view is just silly. I ran a game a number of years ago using basic expert rules, playing through Lost City, and I had to teach a table of 5e players how to read a hit matrix. The most charitable commentary I got from that game was that it was an interesting way of doing things. It was a total turnoff. This is a relic of the past, and it seems a relatively easy change to make. I'll raise my hand and say, yes, I am someone who came back into tabletop hobby because of 5e with generally a favorable view of the old school gaming tradition because of past experiences I had from high school and prior. But if OSC didn't have the ascending AC optional rules included in it, I probably wouldn't bother with it. It's just a hurdle for the system, and I think ditching it is a smart decision for welcoming new players into the old school tradition through Dolmenwood. I would say the largest controversy that came up during the online discussions that I saw was the idea of race plus class being the default character creation system that the Dolmenwood game system rules would present. This, of course, is in opposition of the traditional race as class system. It is also worth noting here that Gavin adopted a new word to replace the problematic word of race as it relates to fantasy species, and instead has chosen the word kindred. You know, this issue of trying to divorce the TTRPG space from using this charged word of race, it's been attempted by several publishers, WotC included, for some time now, and I don't think anyone has nailed it quite as well as this. The word kindred retains that fantastical flavor. It avoids the science fiction feel of the word species, and it conveys more accurately the character creation choice of playing as a human, mossling, elf, grimalkin, whatever. I saw plenty of commentary taking issue even with this significant, yet inconsequential to the gameplay change. I think anyone who has strong opposition with adopting this new language is at best just searching for things to be unhappy about. Now, the design decision for character creation to be kindred as class versus choosing your kindred and class separately, that has some merit to it. It is an old school staple that character creation is simple and quick, human characters being more plentiful with maybe fewer abilities than kindred classes, but with typically faster level advancement, and kindreds having a level cap versus humans. I enjoy the kindred as class option myself, but again, it is one of those odd concepts from old school gaming that feels weird to a lot of modern players. One of the very first experiences a player is going to have when playing a new TTRPG is creating a character. So this change to allow a player to choose their kindred and class separately gives them something that feels natural and something that feels familiar without throwing this sort of antiquated design choice at them right away. It also adds a little bit of nuance to the composition of the group. TTRPG players are always communicating with one another, trying to coordinate and cover all their bases as it relates to party roles. Because of this, it has been my experience that folks don't want to double up on an option. Having a party full of Grimalkins, who all fill the traditional party roles, sounds like a fantastic time to me, something I'd enjoy presiding over as a GM, but something that seems unlikely with a Kindred as class system. And for those that had the gripe that Kindred and class were going to be separated out, they'll be happy to know that it would appear that Gavin has taken those criticisms to heart and is going to offer an appendix where a Kindred as class option for character creation will be included. This seems like a good approach to appeal to both schools of thought and allow those that prefer this to still have that option without putting it forward as that first impression within the rule set. Perhaps as a result, those that feel strongly about Kindred as class will be able to use it yet with their players to introduce newcomers to this concept. And finally, the delay in the Kickstarter. Yes, of course, this is a very disappointing thing, but let's be realistic. The Kickstarter was at best going to happen in March, April. This delay constitutes 3 more months of a wait. In the grand scheme of things, that's nothing. Given how big of an announcement and addition to the project this is going to be, I'm shocked it isn't a longer delay. For anyone who didn't get in on the Dolmenwood Patreon, I totally understand the frustration. The Patreon has been locked for months now as the final touches to the materials were underway, but given how responsive and adaptive Gavin Norman has been to community feedback and his attention to his products, I would suggest we all just take a deep breath and take faith knowing that good things take time and that this project really deserves all the time and attention it needs to be done right. In the coming weeks, I want to do a few videos looking over some of the new materials that are being shared about Dolmenwood, including the new enchanted weapons, changes to the kindreds, proposed classes, spells, and monsters. If you have interesting topics you'd like us to explore here on the channel related to Dolmenwood, or you have questions you want us to find answers to, just post a comment here. I look forward to sharing with you more about Dolmenwood. Invite you to jump into our Discord server if you'd like to talk about the setting or your own adventures within the setting. Until next time.